Thank you very much, Professor Marmot, for that. I hope you'll agree with me that he never fails to provide food for thought and make us think about the bigger picture. And I think in providing the bigger picture, he also managed to bring it back down very nicely for us into the world of work, which is the one we inhabit. So thank you again, Professor Marmot. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Nicolas Schmit, European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights. He holds this job since December 2019 and, of course, is a native of Luxembourg. He is responsible at European level for everything to do with occupational safety and health, and indeed it was he who was there last Monday launching the new EU strategic framework. Now, it's worth mentioning that, well, you can read all of the CVs of today's guests on the event website, but I think it's worth mentioning that from 2009 to 2018, Commissioner Schmit was the Minister for Labour and Employment in the Luxembourgish government. And I have fond memories during that time when Luxembourg held the presidency of the European Union, a trip he paid to Bilbao when we were concluding one of our workplace health and safety campaigns. I think it was one on psychosocial risks in the workplace. And in his capacity as minister, he came to Bilbao to meet with people from across Europe very concerned about that issue. So now here he is, and all I can do is ask him to step into our virtual room and say hello to your virtual, or not to your real friend virtually, Christa Sedlatschek, our Executive Director. Welcome, Commissioner.
Oh, so I'm in your I'm in your virtual room. Hello, Christa.
Welcome, Nicolas. It's a great pleasure for us to have you here today, virtually. And also, I think, to follow up a bit the speech of Professor Marmot, I think it was very impressive. And maybe I'll set the ball rolling and see where it will take us. I have a first, let's say, impression and question. The impression is the speech, of course, or very impressive speech of Professor Marmot. And he talked about inequalities. And I think what we have experienced now during the pandemic is that especially certain groups of workers are negatively affected. We could call these the vulnerable workers, like in the healthcare sector, retail, service delivery, transport, food production. So they worked hard that we could continue and living as before almost. So they delivered services, and I have to say, in general, I would say this group was overworked or has been overworked and underpaid. What were your thoughts now during this 1.5 years about the impact on these vulnerable groups? And what can we do, of course, to improve it?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a great pleasure to be, even if it's only virtually, with you, this very important conference you have organized. Well, my first reaction, if you allow me, to the professor's speech is I absolutely agree with what he said. I think we are living a period even before the pandemic, where we saw inequalities growing. And by the way, the topic of inequality has become a topic which is now everywhere in the debate, be it in international organizations, be it in the political debate, but also be it a debate in our society. I just remember Obama, who said that inequality was one of the biggest issues of our time. So Christine Lagarde, for instance, as a former IMF director and now head of the European Central Bank, has talked a lot about inequality. So I think this is a very serious problem. And we have seen that during the pandemic, inequalities have not gone down, inequalities have gone up. And there is this extreme evolution, which has been mentioned by Professor Marmot about the few 0.001% of very rich people, and all those who have really been affected by the pandemic, who have, as he said, allowed our society to function. And these are the frontline workers, the essential workers, all those in very different jobs who have really been critical for our societies. A lot of them have worked under very difficult circumstances, putting their health at risk. And a lot also in the health sector, among others, have been infected. A certain number have paid the price with their life. And so I think this is an issue which is extremely important when we are now coming out of the pandemic and we are discussing how can we build back better or fairer. And this is the question of value of work. These are the question of protecting people better. We have seen also seasonal workers in some countries very much exposed to the risks of the pandemic. And I think we need now a reflection on working conditions, a general reflection, how we can better protect, how we can better pay also. It's a question about pay. I see, by the way, in some member states where there is a discussion of pay of care workers, and I think this is absolutely justified, about working conditions and protecting them. So I think this is a big issue we should not forget. Once even the pandemic, and the pandemic is not yet over, but even if the pandemic, we get rid of the pandemic, these are issues we have to take care of.
Thank you, Nicolas. I think really have to say we should not forget these times and of course improve working and living conditions. Before I go to the EU strategic framework, I have to admit when COVID-19 started, and more or less at the same time or maybe earlier, we all knew that we would like to see a new EU strategic framework in the year 2021. And I was wondering all the time, how are you managing together with your team, with your colleagues, to achieve that the new strategic framework has been adopted last week? How did you manage to work hard, I'm sure, during this, under these strange and difficult circumstances?
Well, I think even if we hadn't got the pandemic, it would have been extremely important to have a new strategic framework. Certainly, the pandemic has also a certain number of ideas and of this strategic framework. But we have to consider that the world of work is changing rapidly, massively. Sometimes I would say for the better, but in many cases also not for the better. in terms especially of psychological, psychosocial risks, we see an increase of this kind of problems. And therefore, I think we had to combine both. First, the more traditional approaches, because we know that a lot of, we still are surrounded, especially a certain number of workers are surrounded and confronted with very dangerous substances. And we have to go on limiting the exposure to this kind of substances that provoke very, very dangerous diseases, but also sometimes even represent a real lethal risk. Asbestos is one, lead, cobalt, and a few others. So I think these are the issues we have to continue, and we have continued to work on. I think we have really to bring in stricter limitations in terms of exposure. The second one I want to insist on is more the mental diseases. And we see that these are diseases provoked by working conditions which are increasing a lot. Mental health problems affected around 84 million people in the EU. And this is enormous. And we also know that to cure these mental problems, health problems, is very often not very easy. And therefore, we have really to work on this issue very much. So, stress, burnouts, all these elements linked to working conditions, which are not just the fact that people work hard, but also sometimes work in uncertainty. When you do not know if tomorrow you have a job, well, this is an extreme pressure on yourself. And a lot of these mental diseases come from also this question of uncertainty in companies who may have dismissals. We know, for instance, that the difficulties, the health risks of people having no job, of the unemployed, are very much higher. So it's not just that you have difficulties, economic difficulties in terms of revenue, but also you are exposed to higher risks. So I think these are issues we have to take very serious. And if we want a better society, a fairer society, this cannot just be left out, and we have to work on that. And we have done it. We have tried to introduce this. There are a lot of important issues ahead of us, like the right to disconnect, which exists in some member states, but in many others does not exist. So why should some workers in Europe have this right and others would not have it? So we have really to work on that as one example. And my last point is, as you probably have, as you have noticed, well, we still have to fight lethal accidents. You have mentioned it. There's a reduction, and this is very good and very positive. But there are still more than 3,000 people victims of direct victims of lethal accidents. And when I was a Minister of Labour, the most difficult moments I had is when I knew that some people had died on some place, very often in the construction sector, by the way. And this was one of the, for me, always a very hard and very difficult moment. And therefore, the idea, we have to work for a zero lethal accident, or I would say zero very serious accident. This means probably not, we will not achieve this very rapidly, but this has to be an objective we really have to strive for.
Thank you. maybe you touched upon it already, but I would like to come back to the, let's say, priorities in the EU strategic framework, and that is change. And I would like to ask you in which areas and what do you mean with the heavy priority, and to preparedness. What has changed now in the world, which should be prepared for the next pandemic or whatever? So the one priority change, and the other one is preparedness for the future.
Well, I think, as I said already, there had to be some changes because the world of work is changing. With digitalization, the working conditions are changing. They are not automatically worsening, but for some workers in the digital world, they may worsen. They may worsen. Let's think about the platform workers, very often not protected at all because they are considered self-employed and not really protected by our OSHA rules, which I personally consider not really appropriate. Our rules in terms of health and security and safety should apply to everybody, independently from the status. Unemployed, employed, self-employed, entrepreneurs. Also, entrepreneurs should be protected. If I'm a self-employed, a small entrepreneur, why shouldn't I be also protected in the same way as all workers? So this is an issue we really have to take also into consideration. The second one, and you mentioned it, certainly that's the pandemic. Nobody was prepared for a situation like the one we lived through. We reacted. I must say we reacted rapidly, and I thank you personally very much for the work you have done by publishing guidelines, by helping companies to better prepare themselves to face this infection risks. This had to be done in a very short and urgent situation. So I think this is something we have now to draw the lessons of, because now we know what a pandemic means. We know the impact of a pandemic. We know also how to react and how to be better prepared. So I think this is a very important lesson we have learned, and we just should not leave that out, because nobody can know. Nobody knows if I hope this will not happen, but nobody knows if in a longer period or short period we could face a similar situation. So I think this is something we have to build on. We have to be prepared. We have also to help companies mainly to organize. We have to have the equipment more rapidly as we had it during this pandemic, because that was one of the big issues. We were lacking the equipment needed, at least at the beginning. So this is something very important also of our new strategy. Draw the lessons, be prepared, and make sure that if the situation repeats, we can react more rapidly and in a quite bold way. The third element, which I would like to insist on also, is prevention. Prevention is absolutely key. And this is certainly we have to build on better protections, but also making out of safety and health a big issue in the working place. And this means companies, entrepreneurs, but also workers, but also apprentices have to really consider that health and safety is an essential part of their working life. We have to help, especially, and that's, I really remember very well what you have done with small enterprises. And I noticed, by the way, that we got an appeal from the small and medium-sized enterprises to help them to put into place better policies. But prevention is key, and we still have some work to do to improve the preventive approaches.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Now that fits quite well, and this is a question for me. This question accompanies me since I started as a labor inspector. EU-OSHA is, or within the mandate of EU-OSHA is raising awareness. I think that's a very, very important part. But you mentioned also in the new strategy, you will improve the application and enforcement of existing EU law. I think that's crucial also for, let's say, making some pressure also on companies, employers, really to implement national legislation or legislation. How would you try to improve, or will you support the improvement of the application and enforcement of existing law?
Well, first, I think EU-OSHA has an important role to play in terms of advice, in terms also of giving the good information. That's key, because you can only have a good policy if you are really aware, if you have the right information, if you are well advised. So this is an important element, I think, also in the process of implementation. The second one, which is important, is you can have the best laws in the world, the best regulation in the world. If you do not have the right controls, if you do not have the right way how people have to implement this regulation, well, this will not happen, or in many cases it will not happen. So enforcement is absolutely key. And so I think awareness as a first step, I have already mentioned it, at all levels, companies, but also workers, apprentices, very important. But also then we have to put into place in all the member states the right control mechanisms, the authorities who are in charge of controlling. This may change from one country, from one member state to another. In Sweden, it's quite different from France, for instance, or other countries. But to give those who are in charge of controlling the right powers, the right resources. That's an important issue. I hear that in some countries, the resources, for instance, the labor inspectors, the resources of labor inspectors or other authorities in charge of controlling have not always been adapted to the needs. So if you cannot have the right controls, well, there's a risk that at the end, people don't care and do not implement the right regulation. And this is a very short-term calculation, because we all know the cost, not only a human cost, this cannot be evaluated, but there is also a financial cost, a cost for the economy, a cost in terms of productivity if you do not implement these rules rightly.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I only can add and promise you that EU-OSHA will provide and play a key role in providing information, evidence-based information, raise awareness, and so to help also politicians at EU and national level to improve and, of course, improve working conditions, but also to improve enforcement at national level. So we will do our best, and I know that you are supporting EU-OSHA, and I think that was more or less my last comment, and I would like to thank you for this conversation, but I think we will see each other later on. Thank you very much.
I also want to thank you, and as we have another opportunity, I will say a few words, but already now I want to thank you really for what you have done during your mandate. You really have done something fantastic for EU-OSHA, but also for better working conditions for health and safety in Europe, and even more than just in Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Schmit, and thank you, Christa. I really think that with that discussion, we're going to have a very interesting panel, because of course, the panel that's coming, we're going to have representatives of the employers, of the trade unions, of the governments, member of the European Parliament and from the Commission, and also one of our colleagues from EU-OSHA to locate our role in the future of occupational safety and health in Europe. But right now, with just a small delay, but never mind, we're going to take a 15-minute break to move around, stretch, maybe grab a cup of tea, and we will see you back here at 25 minutes past 2 to begin the panel. And I'll just remind you that you can ask your questions already now, but as soon as the panel starts, we're going to be picking up from where Christa and the Commissioner left off, and picking up from where Professor Marmot left us. And we're going to be running with some very profound questions on the future of worker health and safety in Europe. So see you back here in 15 minutes at 25 minutes past 2. Thank you.